The internal quality assurance cells of Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, Khairi Vijayawada Ramtek, and Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College, Parshivani. Since last 1.5 years, the world is going through a strange situation. The COVID pandemic has changed the course of our life. It has made a long-lasting effect on mankind. One of the major areas that has faced the drastic change during these days is the education field. Teaching learning methodologies have undergone a drastic change during these pandemic days. We want to thank our patrons, Honorable Shri Ranjit Babu Deshmukh Sir, ex-Agriculture Minister of Government of Maharashtra and President of VSPM Academy of Higher Education Nagpur, Honorable Ashish Jaiswal Sir, MLA Ramtek and President Vidyasagar Education Society Ramtek, Honorable Srimati Anita Jaiswal Ma'am, Secretary Vidyasagar Education Society Ramtek, and Honorable Shri Yuvraj Chalkhor Sir, Secretary VSPM Academy of Higher Education Nagpur, for giving this idea and opportunity to organize a national webinar on such an important theme of teaching learning methodologies in the post-COVID scenario. I welcome them to this webinar. At the same time, I take this opportunity to welcome Honorable Chief Guest of today's webinar, Dr. Urmila Dabir Ma'am, Principal of Rajkumar Keval Ramani Kanya Mahavidyalaya Nagpur and Chairperson of Board of Studies in English, RTM Nagpur University, Nagpur. I also welcome resource person of today's webinar, Honorable Dr. Dinesh Kumar Sir, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, PG, Vasai College, Mumbai. I also welcome all the respected principals, IQAC coordinators, and teachers who have participated in this webinar. Before I move on further, I must speak a little about the organizing institutions. Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya is governed by Vidyasagar Education Society Ramtek and was established on August 9, 1999 under the chairmanship of late Dr. Vinod Kumarji Jaiswal, an eminent doctor, educationist and visionary of Ramtek, with the aim to open the doors of higher education to the underprivileged, backward and tribal students of Ramtek and adjoining villages. The college is fully aided and recognized by the government of Maharashtra and permanently affiliated to Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University, Nagpur. The college is included under 2F and 12B Act of 1956 and accredited with B grade in the first cycle by the NAC in the year 2018. The college offers BA degree in various subjects. Today, the institution is a leading center providing quality education to the tribal and rural students and empowering them to meet the challenges of 21st century. The collaborative institution in this organization of webinar, Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College, Parshivani, is one of the leading higher educational institutions in Parshivani Taluka. It was established in July 1990. The college is governed by Vidya Shikshan Prasarak Mandal's Academy of Higher Education, Nagpur. It is fully aided by the government of Maharashtra and permanently affiliated to RTM Nagpur University, Nagpur. The college offers undergraduate courses in arts and commerce, faculty and postgraduate courses in Marathi, sociology and economics. The college has successfully faced 2 cycles of NAC accreditation. At present, the college is a leading educational institutions, one of the leading educational institutions in Parshivani Taluka, providing quality education to the rural students. Now, I invite respected Dr. PKU Pillai Sir, Principal, Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya and convener of this webinar to deliver the introductory address. Respected Dr. PKU Pillai Sir.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Someone,
You're audible,
am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, sir.
I am audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, shall I start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Honorable patrons of the two societies, Shri Ranjit Babu Deshmukh, Advocate Ashushji Jaiswal, Honorable Anitaji Jaiswal ma'am, Shri Yuvrajji Chalkor sir, Honorable Chief Guest of today's inaugural function, Dr. Urmila Devi ma'am, Principal Rajkumar Keval Ramani Kanya Mahavidyalaya Nagpur, Honorable Resource Person Dr. Dinesh Kumar from BG Vase College Mumbai, Respected Principal of Parshvini Dr. LB Jadhav, Organizing Secretaries, Organizing Committee members, IQAC coordinators of various colleges who have joined today's webinar, and dear teachers, on behalf of both the colleges, Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, Ramtek, and MG Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College, Parshvini, I extend a hearty welcome to all of you to today's national webinar. It's a matter of great pleasure for me to say that the IQAC of Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, Khairi, Ramtek, and MG College of Arts and Commerce, Parshvini, are jointly organizing a national webinar on the topic teaching learning methodologies in the post-COVID scenario. At the very outset, let me submit that this is a collaborative program of both the colleges, and without the cooperation of Principal Dr. LB Jadhav, this would not have been possible. Congratulations to the IQAC coordinators of both the colleges. I'm sure that the topic of the webinar today is extremely relevant and important in today's academic context. We are passing through an extremely difficult and challenging time because of the pandemic. The educational scenario is quite disturbing for all the stakeholders, teachers, students, parents, education societies, and all those educationists and all those who are associated with the field. The chief guest and the keynote speaker are better equipped to elaborate and discuss the topic in detail. I believe that the deliberations would be helpful to all of us, all the stakeholders of higher education in the state, to face the challenges and overcome them with new methodologies and technological competence in the post-COVID scenario. Once again, I welcome all of you and wish the webinar all success. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to Dr. Dharma Puriwal.
Thank you, respected sir, for throwing light on the theme of this webinar and making clear that how these types of webinars are important in these days. Now I invite Ravindra Pantavne sir, Assistant Professor from the Department of English, Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, Ramtek, and request him to introduce chief guest of this webinar, Honorable Dr. Urmila Devi ma'am. Over to Ravindra Pantavne sir.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to one and all present here. I, Ravindra Pantavne, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, Khairi Vijayawada, Ramtek, feel honored to welcome and introduce Dr. Urmila Devi. Before I start a formal introduction, I wish to welcome our chief guest, Dr. Urmila Devi, Principal, Head of Department of English, Rajkumar Keval Ramani Kanya Mahavidyalaya, Jaripatka, Nagpur. and Chairperson of Board of Studies English, RTM, Nagpur University, Nagpur. Ma'am, I welcome you on behalf of both the organizing institutions. Dr. Dabir has vast teaching experience, 30 years at UG and 22 years at PG level, and also has 13 years of administrative experience as a principal. She has a massive research experience too. 10 students have been awarded PhD under her supervision by Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur. Dr. Dabir has several prestigious awards to her credit. She was awarded Dr. Krishna Kumar Gold Medal for the Best Principal by RTM, Nagpur University, Nagpur in 2019. She was invited as a panelist for Swachh Bharat Abhiyan by Mumbai Doordarshan in 2014. She was also awarded Best Teacher Award by Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur 2013. She achieved Educational Excellence Award by Indo-Thai Forum for her contribution in the field of education in 2011. Her research paper entitled Paralinguistic Communication, Paralanguage as a Teaching Aid for L2 Learners of English was adjudged as best among the papers. She presented this paper in the international seminar on innovation in language teaching in technical education, organized by Tulsi Ramji Gaikwad Patil College of Engineering and Technology, Nagpur. She attended the World Forum on Social Development, Geneva 2000 conference, and presented a paper entitled Women and Education in Indian Context in June 2000. She was deputed as contingent leader of NSS of Maharashtra and Goa for Republic Day Parade, New Delhi in 2000. She was awarded the Best Program Officer State Award by the Government of Maharashtra for the year 1997-98. She is the first program officer from Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, and the first female program officer from the state to receive this award. She has been working on numerous responsible and respectful positions, not only in RTM, Nagpur University, Nagpur, but in other universities also. She was elected Chairman Board of Studies English, Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur, session 2017-18. She was elected member Senate, Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur, 17-18. She was elected member Management Council, Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur, 17-18. She was also elected member Standing Committee, Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur, session 2017-18. She was elected member she is an ANAC assessor, visited college in the capacity of coordinator and member since 2015. She was nominated as visitor nominee by HRD Ministry, New Delhi on selection committee of teaching and non-teaching staff, Central University of Tamil Nadu, 2015. She was nominated coordinator for arts faculty, RTM, Nagpur University in October 2015. She was nominated as a member, Research Recognition Committee, Gondwana University, Gadchiroli, 2015. Respected Madam has been working on several other significant committees in RTM, Nagpur University, Nagpur. But due to restriction of time, I'm not able to cover all the committees here. Dr. Dabir has authored 2 books. First, Word and Image, Articulation on Literature and Films, published by Dattasens, Nagpur, 2013. Second, Dream Child, a biography in translation, Shiv Ganga Prakashan, Nagpur. She edited Parsi Anthology with Dr. Vandana Pathak and Dr. Shubha Mishra, published by Dattasens, Nagpur in 2012. She also edited a book titled Deconstruction, a New Consideration in Humanities, published by Lambert Academic Publishing, Germany, with Dr. Shende in 2011. As an editor, she has numerous literary and academic books like an anthology of female writers, Asian literature in English and Identity and Survival, and Dewdrops to international journals, Dewdrops to her credit. She has published more than 60 research articles in national and international journals, conference proceedings, and edited books. She is the editor of Cenacle and Imprint, 2 reputed and peer-reviewed journals. It is noteworthy that in the COVID crisis, In the present scenario, Dr. Dabir has initiated many projects for students in collaboration with English teacher. Without taking much time, may I now request our chief guest, Dr. Dabir, Dr. Rubella Dabir, to express her thought.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pantavne. The honorable patrons, Shri Ranjit Babu Deshmukh, Honorable Shri Advocate Ashish Jaiswal, Honorable Srimati Anita Ji Jaiswal, Honorable Yuvraj Chakolkar, the principals who are the conveners of this webinar, my very old friend, Dr. P.K. Pillai, Dr. Jadhav, the organizing secretaries, and the honorable resource person, Dr. Dinesh Nair. It is my proud privilege to be a part of this webinar because I'm associated with this college for a long time. And I have a very long association with Mrs. Jaiswal also. I convey my regards to her through this platform. As we all know that we have seen a sea change in all these spheres, may it be economic, social, and even educational sphere cannot be untouched. So since March 2020, there has been sea change in all the spheres and fields of our life. Any educational field was also affected due to this pandemic. All of a sudden, schools and colleges were closed. And till today, it wears a very deserted look. Without students, there is no life in the college, as if the soul has gone from all these institutions. And we had to carry on. And only, I remember that in March, only a few examinations were conducted by RTM Nagpur University. And the fate of other examinations was uncertain. We didn't know what would happen. There were many problems before us, how to conduct the examination because courses were yet to be completed. And at that particular time, teachers were not that techno-savvy. And they were a bit hesitant also. And a sudden shift from classroom to online teaching was seen. That took a time for that. And we can say technology came to our rescue. And a complete change was there in teaching and learning process. As it is said that the show must go on, and we are still carrying out this show. And we are sure, positive, that this particular uncertainty will end soon. And our college campus will see the hustle and bustle of our students. Our classrooms would be full. And there would be a lot of exchange between the teachers and the students. These online classes were a bit problematic in the beginning because there were many problems from the side of the teachers also, from the side of the students also. And these problems were very peculiar in the rural areas. Still, we face a lot of problem because of the internet connectivity. That was the greatest hindrance that we have seen. And at this particular juncture, I congratulate Dr. Pillai and Dr. Sawant Dharmapurivar to come up with a collaborative effort on the topic which is of prime importance and relevance in this particular situation. And our learned and eminent resource person will certainly throw a light, and it will on this occasion. I take this opportunity to share some of my experience on the methodologies that we used in the COVID and post-COVID situation. These are the personal experiences which are there, and these experiences will definitely be of use to the teachers because these are tested and experimented with the students. As I said that the senior teachers were a bit hesitant in the use of technology, but they had an urge to learn because they wanted to reach to their students. And they took up this challenge and we started with the online classes. In the beginning, the attendance was very poor. negligible, we can say. That was very disturbing, disheartening. But after some time, even the students realized the importance of these online classes. And it was not only the importance that they realized, but it was a necessity also. It was necessary for them to attend these classes. So the attendance started increasing day by day. And now I'm very happy to say that now the classes are almost full in the online sessions also. There was a revision in the syllabus of English at the university, right from UG to PG. And the syllabus was not designed for this particular examination that was to be conducted by the university, because all the essay type questions were there. And the students were not ready for the MCQs. So that was again a great challenge, because we were teaching something and they had to appear for the examination in a different way. So we had to merge these particular things, taking into consideration the examination point of view. We were not aware of this particular pandemic that would take place, but Orient Black Swan, when we revised the UG syllabus, they came up with an app in the textbook, and the students could access to the grammar portion and the MCQs that were given over there. So that came as a savior, because that app could be utilized by the students. Again, we thought of many things, and in one of the Board of Studies meetings, we came out with an idea of cluster of colleges. And this cluster of college will consist of colleges from Nagpur and the rural areas. And on an experimental basis, we started online sessions for semester 1 compulsory students. We took up this challenge for compulsory students, and we invited teachers of English from different colleges, from Nagpur and other colleges of our university. We didn't know how this experiment would work, but we got an overwhelming response from the students. They really enjoyed this online sessions because they got an exposure to the course that they had, and the response was great from the teachers also and from the students also, because a number of teachers from other colleges, they joined us as resource persons. And this was something new for the students, because they could see or interact with only one of the teachers from the college. But now they had an exposure for the teachers from different colleges. Their way of teaching, giving examples was different for them, and they accepted it very heartily. Then this encouraged us to go in for the English literature classes. We were going on step by step. And there was improvement in what we were doing also. And this improvement helped the teachers as well as the students to grow as teachers and grow as students both. Now the question of PG students was before us. So we experimented with the PG students also. And I'm very happy to say that all these experiments were successful. And today, we have so many students joining these online classes, which has helped them. And then there was again a question that how to reach them with the content that we have. So we developed e-content. And this e-content was developed as per the examination pattern that was to be conducted by the university. Because by that time, the university had declared the system of conducting examinations. So as I said, the course that we had devised and the teaching that we were doing, they were totally different. So we had to merge, we had to bridge this particular gap. So we designed this particular e-content in which so many colleges, even Dr. Pillai and Dr. Dharmapurivar has played a major role in developing this e-content. This e-content was not restricted only to the collaborating colleges, but it had an open access for all the students of the university. And students from all over, Bivapur, Gondia, Mandara, they all joined. And we got phone calls from the students that, Madam, can you forward this particular e-content to us? And I'm very happy that the guide culture that we have, I think somewhere that will come to an end if we provide the material which is authentic to our students. We have to make them self-sufficient with what they need from the point of examination and from the point of knowledge also. So we have all experimented in these areas, not only for the UG, but for PG also, providing them with guidance, providing them with the e-content also. And I'm very happy that in this particular exercise, the English fraternity, teachers of English fraternity, they all came close together. Not one college, two college, but so many colleges joined together. And there was enthusiasm, so much of encouragement was seen on the WhatsApp. Every college was coming up with questions. Question bank was coming up with, practice tests were giving to the students. So much of activity is going on in WhatsApp for the students. I think this is the success of the teachers when they come together. And this is the success of the teachers of the English fraternity of Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University. I'm really grateful to all of them. And one more thing that we did was that many students were working and many students did not have access to the phones also, mobile phones. So we went on to have the recorded version of these presentations, lectures on YouTube, so that they could see this recording whenever they had this technology available to them. As we have seen that webinars have taken place of seminars. And as I said in the beginning, that show has to go on. And we are going on successfully. And we adapt to different things that are there. We have adapted the technology also. We have adapted to the change in the system of examination, to the system of teaching and learning process also. And we know that we have our limitations, but within those limitations also, we are trying to reach a larger community of our students who are our responsibility at this particular time. I once again congratulate Dr. Pillai, Dr. Dharmapurivar, and the other collaborating college also, who have joined together on a common mission, a mission which is very, very important for us. And I'm looking forward for a very, very successful, you can say, activity that would be going on throughout the day with an eminent resource person like Dinesh Kumar. Once again, I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Pillai for inviting me, and I wish success to this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Dr. Dabir ma'am. Listening to Honorable Dr. Urmila Dabir ma'am is always a joyride. Her guidance is always treasured with deep knowledge and learning. She is instrumental and remained at the center of creating online study material, conducting online video tutorials, conducting online practice tests in the subject English for the UG and PG students of RTM Nagpur University during these pandemic days. Through her lecture, she has thrown light on teaching and learning methodologies in the post-COVID scenario. Honorable ma'am, thank you for your valuable guidance. Thank you so much. Now I once again request Ravindra Pantavane sir to introduce resource person of this webinar, Honorable Dr. Dinesh Kumar sir, and invite him for his enlightening thoughts.
Thank you, sir. It is a great honor for me to introduce Dr. Dinesh Kumar Nair sir, Dean Research, Associate Professor, and Head Department of English, VG Vijay College, Mumbai. Dr. Dinesh Kumar has teaching experience of 29 years at UG and PG level. He is a recognized research guide of PhD at the University of Mumbai. He is also a research guide of MPhil in YC MOU. Dr. Dinesh Kumar has authored 8 academic books published, 31 research articles in reputed journals, and presented above 40 research papers at national and international conferences. He is a member of peer review team of Research Imprint, a journal published by Srimati P.N. Doshi, Women's College, Ghatkopar. He is a member of Curriculum Designing Committee in various universities. He has designed the syllabus for undergraduate and postgraduate programs. He has been a resource person in many national and international conferences and seminars. He is invited as a resource person in UGC, HRDC refresher courses of various universities. He completed a major research project funded by the University of Mumbai titled Psychological Probing and Moral Ambiguity in the Short Stories by Pakistani Women. It was completed in 2009. UGC funded a minor research program titled A Lapping Sound of Tender Coconut Water, showed expression of emotion in Anita Nair's The Better Man, Ladies Cook and Mistress. It was completed in 2013. 6 scholars have been awarded PhD degree under his supervision, and 6 more scholars will submit their thesis very soon. 22 scholars have been awarded MPhil under his guidance from YCMOU. He has conducted several curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities. He worked on different committees at the University of Mumbai. He has been invited as a guest lecturer by several institutions. He is a corporate trainer who conducted numerous workshops on communication skills, presentation skills, business etiquettes, and group discussion for corporate employees and teachers. In short, Dr. Dinesh Kumar is a multi-dimensional personality, research supervisor, academician, curriculum designer, writer, and a corporate trainer. He has delivered numerous online lectures in national and international webinars concerning academics in the COVID pandemic situation. We are happy to have you as a resource person, sir. For this webinar, I warmly welcome you and invite you to address this virtual gathering. Dr. Dinesh Kumar Nair, sir.
Yeah, I'll just take a minute to get to my slides.
Yes, sir.
I'll try and share my screen and then hopefully I can share. Please let me know once my slides are visible. Is the slide visible yet?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, great. That's great. Fantastic. Now, these are the usual jitters that we always have when we are into an online session like this.
Yes, sir.
Great. At the outset, let me express my immense gratitude to the patrons of both the colleges, Vidyasagar Kala Vidyalaya and MG College. I must also put on record my highest sense of appreciation for the 2 dynamic principals heading these institutes, Dr. Unnikrishnan Pillai and Principal Jadhav. And I've not been more at home when I visit any other place as compared to Nagpur, because I've been to Nagpur for quite a few times, and it's just a sorry fact that we have to meet here on an online platform. At the same time, I feel it's a very warm getting back to my friends. So, and then we also have the dynamic leadership of Dr. Urmila Dabir. And I'm so heartened to know that RTM University has had a series of programs to upload the content, teaching, learning content on various digital platforms also. Very concerted effort and very praiseworthy kind of an effort on the part of the English department, the BOS. And these are all the signs of we as educators have taken up the pandemic situation, not merely as a disadvantage, but also as an opportunity to experiment with the new methods of content delivery. So that's truly very heartening for me. What I intend to do today is a kind of a deliberation into a title, Teaching Methodology and Pedagogies in Post-Pandemic Scenario. That's how I titled my talk. I've taken this very deliberately, the title, because we are currently looking at the teaching methodologies. We have already mobilized some of them, some new alternate methodologies. And we are also rethinking about the pedagogy. The word pedagogy itself gets a little altered in the pandemic scenario. And I've also been very deliberate in putting the post-pandemic with the post in parenthesis, because even the post-pandemic scenario looks a little distant, because we are into many waves of this pandemic, COVID-19, starting from March 2020. We have been into many waves of social distancing, many waves of quarantine, many waves of lockdown, and many waves of unlocking. So it's a kind of a game between this, these microbes and human beings. The moment we are ready almost to unlock completely, there comes a wave. So there are many predictions, speculations, apart from all the medicines that we talk about, the vaccines that we talk about. We haven't come truly to a post-pandemic scenario. So post-pandemic can be a contingent situation, or it can be maybe a speculative situation, given the fact that we as human beings have been living rather quite unmindfully at times with nearly 16 trillion microbes. So we also know that the virus mutates, and in its mutated avatars, with this Delta variant also coming into play, we don't know what and how and when will be the post-pandemic scenario. Will it be a new normal, or will we go back to, as a kind of wishful thinking, whether we will be going back to the physical space in the classrooms and teaching and our live interaction. I agree totally with Dr. Dabir when she said that the real pleasure is the face-to-face interaction. When we get to see our students in life and blood, and sitting in front of us and responding to us. So that is an experience which cannot be completely replaced with any other method. So if these are a few situations that we are mindful about, that post-pandemic scenario itself is a bit distant. It's not, if you're talking about getting back to physical environment for teaching, we may continue to experiment with a number of things that we have already started with in the last 1 year. And I'm also mindful of the fact that this webinar has been organized by 2 colleges which serve largely the rural student population. And then thereby, I believe this effort is doubly relevant, because it is in the rural India that we really understand the challenges of going online, challenges of depending on already a very feeble network, and then the erratic power supply, and the economy, which might even deprive the learners of a clear access to gadgets. So recently, I was reading an article of UNESCO, in which it is said that it is only 17% of the student population in India and other third world countries have an access to the gadgets which are dependable when it comes to online education. So this is quite different from more affluent countries, where that percentage can go up to 90 or even more than that. So we are also mindful of this kind of lopsided distribution of technology. Technology is also not very democratic. It has its own problems when it comes to equity. So that's also there somewhere in the back of my mind. Then I was also looking at my own stand in this. What would be my stand on a topic like this? Am I a technocrat? And by no stretch of imagination, I am not. And secondly, am I an expert in education psychology? Again, I'm not. So what is my ground? What is my own legitimacy in talking about this topic? So generally, I consider myself as a thinker. I'm very analytical at times. I go deeper into create my own perceptions about situations. So like most of you, I was also partly affected, and I also had a bit of resistance in the beginning towards online teaching, and I had my own pitfalls when I was trying all these. So it's like after a lot of trial and error, I have also migrated to some extent to this digital platform. You might have already heard about the difference between the digital natives and digital migrants, people who are of the contemporary society, of the age group, who are born in the post 1990s are digital natives because they are very comfortable with the digital platform. And for someone like me, I'm a digital immigrant. I have migrated to the digital platform to learn new skills, and so that I can ensure some amount of content delivery when it comes to all such situations. So that's where I stand. And I'm more like a philosopher. I'm more like a thinker, rather than looking at that as someone who's engaged in planning of education. So that's my stand. That is my perspective. At the outset, I would like to make that clear. So I may not be talking about the latest of the methodologies, but I'll be definitely having some of the perspectives, my own perspectives on these methodologies as we go along. So with that very long preamble, I would like to begin. Maybe in another 30 minutes or so, I will walk you into this thought process. These are like exercises as I'm speaking, I'm engaged in thinking. So as we stand today, after probably 2 semesters of teaching online and 2 cycles of assessment, testing and assessment, both summative and also with we have the internals and all. We have done 2 cycles of both instruction and assessment. So one of the questions that comes to my mind, one larger question in the context of education, in any subject for that matter, we have done that. We have done some trials. We have done some practices. In the light of that, light of that experience, the larger question here is, does our teaching delivery, curriculum delivery, does it need a refresh command? Going by the language of computer, does it need a refresh command? Do we need to refresh, reorient our entire approach? That's one question, because it's all about curriculum delivery. But at the same time, we have become quite mindful, I believe, after about 1 year and 2 semesters of delivery, there are quite a few challenges. And one of the biggest challenges, I believe, is that if you all remember that we have, all of us were engaged in curriculum designing. We, at our place, we went autonomous last year, and we, with a lot of zest, we made a curriculum for that. Without knowing that, we had to deliver that later completely online. So I call this as a kind of academic tightrope walking. And why is it a tightrope? Because we have an offline content, we have an offline curriculum, which has to be delivered online. So, it's a curriculum that comes first. And by the time that had to be implemented, the situation changed completely. So it involves a conversion of the methodology, converting the classical teaching methodology, like a lecture in a classroom, into what we call as digital delivery or online mode. That bridge, like the gaps that Dr. Dabir was talking about, the gaps have not been bridged. There are quite a few gaps. Okay. Especially in the context of the, as I told you, the design of the curriculum, and how we, in a total mode, in complete totality, we imported that into online mode. which has also created a few issues. Another thing, if we all remember, when the pandemic started, there was a grinding halt to the entire academic processes. And then we were called upon all of a sudden to go online. And that point of time in various states across the country, teaching started, unlike in the West, the Western countries where the instructors were already educated even before that, because they were already into a lot of distance mode of teaching. In India, that was completely different. It was all like the approach was do-it-yourself approach. All managements, all universities, and all institutions left it largely to the teachers, thankfully also, I would say, to the teachers to experiment. So we all launched into this without any credible training on the part of instructors. For example, how to make a video, how to edit the video. That's even more challenging a task. So we launched into that. We created content, online content, and we started teaching synchronous and also in asynchronous mode. Even more alarming at times, which I found, was the lack of preparation on the part of the institutes. Like all principals and all managements wanted to launch online teaching without even having a proper audio-visual recording facility. So it was like some of us were doing it on mobile, some of us were doing it on a laptop. So it was, I would say that if I can draw a structuralist term, it was a very bricolier approach. What was handy, what was available handy, was taken into this platform. So that this was the scenario. Then also equally important would be a few questions that you can ask in the context of online delivery. When we started with this online curriculum, we it is where we stand is, as I've already mentioned, after completing 2 semesters of online teaching in 2020, with the semester lagging well into July and even August probably of 2021. It is time we have done. It is no longer new now. Online teaching is no longer new. It is time, I think, most appropriate time for us to reflect, to see how effective this teaching was. For me, to be very honest, I would say that effectiveness of my delivery is not yet measured. It's somewhere I feel that I have done something. I have created a video, and I have not been very thoughtful, honestly, about the quality of the video. Quality not in terms of the content, but also the production quality of the videos. So the questions that we could answer at this point would be one, how enriching it is both for students and teachers for now, and how enriching would it be in the future also. Then secondly, can we also join the bandwagon of the kind of digital evangelism which was also sweeping across the country? Do we have a scope for digital evangelism, or do we need to take it with a pinch of salt, with a filter, and to understand the mechanics, the politics, and the economy behind the digital movement also? The third question that disturbs me time and again is that, do we have enough data on online learner behavior? Because like I always consider students' attendance, not presence, attendance. I mean in the right cognitive sense, the word attendance. When they are attentive, then they are attending, according to me. So what has been the student behavior like? What kind of data do we have about this online learner behavior, as much the online teacher behavior as well? As teachers, we have suddenly become very aware of our presence, screen presence, body language, inflections, quite unlike in a normal classroom, physical classroom. So what has been the adaptation? What have been the adaptations made by the students? And how do they attend a lecture? See, it's like they log in from their own spaces, their own comfortable zones. Are they sitting and what is their body language? Are they taking down the notes? Or are they just 3 dots on the screen, like where again we call out to them and then they respond? Do we have enough student data on that learner behavior also? And I believe that learning largely depends upon the learner behavior as well, motivation, attitude, and so many other things. The energy, the way, the posture, all of them go into the learning behavior. So that is also one data that I'm so much interested in. Then the COVID scenario and the online pedagogy have opened up a number of significant concerns also, from perspective, particularly from the perspective of the learners. One is that very often the students complain of long hours of screen time. Screen time has its own limitation, including the posture hazard that we have. I mean, even some of the teachers have also started complaining. Apart from the other problems, long hours, maybe 6 hours of listening. And again, another question is, what is the attention span? In a normal classroom, if it is 48 minutes, we have not redesigned that most of the time. It continues to be 48 minutes even for online teaching. Is it compatible with that? That's about the screen time. Some schools have reworked the concept of periods and lectures. That was really fascinating. So students very often complain about the long hours of screen time. Then there are issues of overlapping lectures, like many departments conducting lectures. And some of the students also attend the other than college courses. So there are issues of overlapping lectures. Then some of them even complain about the lack of self-learning time, because in a normal college situation, we have your own typical timetable. We start at 7 o'clock and finish at 12:30. After that, the teachers are also free and the students are also free. So they are supposed to do the rest of the work after that. But then that went for a toss. That kind of a timetable went for a toss in the COVID situation. So the lectures were conducted, and I myself am guilty of that, having conducted lectures as late as 8 o'clock in the evening. So depending on so many other factors and variables. So this lack of self-learning time has been another concern. Then the next thing that it's very common, connectivity and bandwidth issues, especially when we are on a video mode of presentation, we need a healthy bandwidth. And also one cannot assume that all our students have a Wi-Fi, because I did a very rough survey even in a city college where I teach. And I found out that nearly 76% of my students use a mobile phone. They don't have a laptop. So 76% students, even in an urban locality, would use a mobile phone. And I'm sure in the rural area, this can be even more significantly a disturbing issue. So some of them may not have their own gadget. They might have to borrow that from their parents and so on. And plus the connectivity issue. Connectivity in terms of the signal strength of certain internet providers and certain service providers. I don't know. My personal experience has been my mobile phone service provider has not improved the signal strength during the pandemic. So that's a time when they should have done it, but then that did not happen. So that's another issue. So when I give an assignment, online assignment, I assume that they can type. Assuming that this was my prejudice, my bias. So I used to give them assignments, and I used to feel that they could easily type with a keyboard before them. That was not the case. Some of them did not have an access to even laptop or a computer. So there is a kind of a mismatch. There is a gap between the instructor's assumption and the learner's reality. That was also another point. Then there are significant concerns about COVID positive cases. I've had students having twice and thrice infected by COVID. or in quarantine, some of family members, many cases in the family, and hence they don't have a learning space. They don't have a space. I've had students in the last year attending lectures outside, sitting in a garden and so on, because they had problems. These are certain urban problems. And in some cases, they had to go out to get signal strength. So that was another. And then somewhere in the hospital, and they were pretty troubled about sending the assignment on time and appearing for the internal examination and so on. So a range of these problems. And also, along with all that, some of them had, some chaos in home atmosphere. And home atmosphere was in terms of the economy. Nearly 20 million Indians lost their job. So you can imagine what would have been the pressure. And then also in the COVID scenario, their career possibilities. So some of them were even a bit anxious about what career would they choose, including maybe some of the engineering students. So that these were a few concerns, which I'm sure all of you also must be quite mindful of that. The challenge, of course, was all of us faced, and we did with a moderate success, I would say, if not a complete success story. With a moderate success, we were able to convert, and that was a challenge. We were able to convert the classical teaching pedagogy into a digital or online mode. So which we, to some extent, we managed. We had the classical curriculum. We had lecture-based curriculum, which we tried, and we could, to some extent, we could address this challenge. Teachers have indeed, and definitely yes, I'm even while we are talking about the impact of various professions, I've been quite haunted all the time about what is my impact in the COVID-19 situation. Am I as indispensable as the health workers, or do I really do something to the society? Then eventually I found out my answer after 1 year. Initially, I used to feel very depressed, thinking that I don't have much of an impact on this society. COVID-infected society. Gradually, I found out that when I'm interacting with my students, I am doing the work of a counselor. I'm doing the work of a psychologist. I am doing the work of a mentor. And thereby, I'm keeping their motivation level slightly high. And that is also a service when I'm contributing to the mental health. And all educators, I believe, in the post-COVID and the COVID scenario are mentors. They are dealing with the mental health of the students. So thereby, we are also impactful. And the teachers have indeed tried their best to adopt to a flexible way of using recorded video, some live sessions, and a few quizzes here and there to overcome this challenge of online delivery. Then we also launched into what is called the not so explored teaching methods. And these methods have emerged as alternate options to many other traditional teaching methods as well. So even that has been a reality. All right. Now I quickly move into a couple of discussions into the shift of what I would call as the pedagogy across time. And then I would try to assess that in the context of the pandemic and maybe what we call as the speculative post-pandemic scenario. To understand the traditional education, we need to understand the word pedagogy. A pedagogical approach, it comes from the word peda, which means child. Pedagogy is basically about teaching a child. That is the assumption. It is about the teacher hand-holding the student, the teacher sensitizing the learner to follow a particular pattern, to learn, and the teacher decides, in pedagogy, it's the teacher who decides the method and explains the content. So it is totally in the hands of the teacher to design the curriculum, decide it, and then to deliver it. So the onus is completely on the teacher. And the conventional pedagogical methods which we have been using for a very long time have been lectures, tutorials, practical exercises, assignments, coaching, quiz, discussion. All of them are considered to be the conventional pedagogical methods. But around the 1970s, I believe, a new term, a new method came into teaching learning process, which revolutionized the way a curriculum was designed, decided, and delivered. And that is the word, the term is the andragogy. Andragogy means adult, especially higher education has been considered subsequently as teaching adults. They are responsible adults. They are responsible for their own decisions. They can make sensible decisions. So andragogy, which was propagated by a wonderful thinker, a consultant, Malcolm Knowles, who wrote a book and who published a book, Self-Directed Learning, in 1975, a book which talks about the readiness to learn, which is very important, orientation to learn, motivation to learn, along with the positive classroom climate based on cooperative learning. So Knowles talks about a different way of looking at teaching and pedagogy, thinking that all learners at the higher education level are adults. And the purpose of higher education should be about self-knowledge and global citizenship. If you wonder where this term in NAC comes from, NAC uses this time and again, global citizenship. Thanks to our great friend Malcolm Knowles. So this was propagated as early as the 1970s. So this became a very significant milestone, a turn in pedagogy and academics. And the concept of andragogy became very, very popular then. And then it was also an attempt to depend on the learner to often develop learning more consciously and reflectively than being taught. So it is like the psychology that I always talk about. Students refuse to be taught. So students refuse to be taught, but they like to learn. That indeed they like to learn. So this is the kind of understanding that goes into that. And if you're looking at the andragogical approach, which are slightly different from the pedagogical method, we have methods like case teaching, that is case studies and case teaching, role play, which is again a kind of a hands-on learning of a situation, field visit. Now that's why one of the reasons that we have industrial visits as a part of our curriculum. Then the concept of studio, wherein you develop your own and you develop certain finishing schools and so on. And the game, a lot of learning games, which come in the form of instructional designs of late. So these are the methods which are slightly different from the pedagogical methods. But the evolution doesn't stop here. Pedagogy, which was there probably from the beginning of education, evolved into andragogy, especially in the context of higher education, with the input from Malcolm Knowles. And in the 21st century, with an increasing use of online mode of delivery, digital content, digital platform, and virtual classrooms, and so on. With all these devices being available, came an idea called heutagogy. Heutagogy is a term which has been put in circulation in the 21st century, especially by two Australian scholars. They are psychologists. They are also consultants, and the term was popularized by a German-born Australian psychologist, Stuart Haase and Chris Kenyon. By 2000, this term was in circulation. Then these two, in fact, particularly Stuart Haase is a Southern Cross University scholar in Australia. Both are also writers. Interestingly, they have been consultants. They have also been writers, even trying their hands in fiction. Very interesting combination in them. Heutagogy is largely about the self-determined learning, with an idea of making capable learners. Like it's a skill. For example, if I'm an instructor, and if I understand that my learners will depend a lot more on online content. So my orientation or my mentoring will be largely to make them capable of learning by themselves. This is quite different from a conventional pedagogy. This is different from even the concept propagated by Knowles. So the role of a teacher here is more like a mentor. And the teacher would mentor the students to learn responsibly and from multiple sources. Now that is the situation. So like Dr. Dabir has already said that the delivery and the transfer of the content were multimodal through synchronous live lectures, recorded lessons on YouTube channels. So learners could access that at their convenience. So if you are looking at that, the sources are anything but the classroom, if that is a thing. So the classroom has minimal interaction, and the rest of them are all on the digital modes. We have audio visuals, we have electronic books, we have recorded lectures, we have channels, and so on. All of them create the multiple sources. And the reality of the 21st century is also that. And I'll come back to some of the problems with that. But then the reality is that it is wrong to assume on my part that my student is completely dependent on me. You know, the omnipotence and the omniscience of the teacher is ruptured. That stand is challenged. Then there are other sources, and there are multiple sources also which the students can access. And then offsetting myself as a teacher from the classroom is the biggest challenge for me. And that humility is something that we need to acquire by and by, and probably all of us will do that also. So creating responsible learners and independent learners will be the focus of what is called the heutagogy, which has already been a practice and a reality now in the society. So when we look at then higher education in India, I'll come back to leave those scenarios and I'll come back to India. Let us look at what has been happening in the higher education ecosystem and what we popularly call as blended learning and how that has been making an impact. Blended learning is a mixture of both the traditional and the modern modes, all the multimodal teaching methods and so on. So what has happened in last 1 year? This is an assessment. This is where my perspective comes in. There has been an increase in the remote teaching and learning, no doubt. We, for example, in the last 1 year, I could not go to my college even once for teaching. For other purposes I could, but then not for teaching because there were other challenges as well. The college did not have a very stable internet connection or a Wi-Fi connection. So they could not call all the teachers. I think that similar stories must be there in the other colleges as well. So there was definitely an increase in the remote teaching and learning efforts on the part of the teachers, academic planners, university authorities, and even on the part of the students. So some of them had to buy mobile phones, Android phones, and so on. But then there has been an interest, and it could be a drastic increase. You could, if you assess the data, we will see that there is a drastic increase in that. But, however, even this has happened, and as proudly on one hand, when we say that we could launch into online teaching successfully, and we could respond to the crisis, fine, great, we did. But then this is quite different. What happened during the pandemic is quite different from what one would call as quality online learning programs. We had online learning programs even before pandemic, but very few of us would rather look into those courses. Udemy and so many other courses, but then very few were rather compelled to look into that. So we need to differentiate between online learning program and quality online learning program. And quality online learning programs, if you subscribe and if you take up a course like that, that involves high input operations, cost-wise, effort-wise. It's not just you, like we record a video and put it up on YouTube. That's very, I would say that that's very unprofessional. So high input orientation operations, like having a good system for recording, and how one would use a good video editor to integrate the slide and the video, all that would become important. The online learning, preparing modules for online learning programs will also require more time. In fact, double the time that of a normal classroom. It will also involve significant investments. There comes the key issue. Investments in terms of, for instance, I'm still negotiating with my institute to have a complete package where we can have good video lessons recorded by the teachers and create modules and then upload them. But it has not happened because of the investment cost. Because initially, most of the people had an idea that you just need a mobile phone or a laptop and you record. Now, that's not the quality input. That's not a quality online learning program. So we need to differentiate that. I feel that if you don't do that, if we do not do that, what will happen is that the learning spaces will become very spurious. The learning spaces will become very adulterated with a lot of substandard material also. Then, I also believe that the blended learning, which we started using in the context of the pandemic, will yield more benefits in the post-pandemic scenario. Because in future, virtual instructions will not go away. Pandemic probably will end. Maybe the COVID-19 virus will come to an end, but then the virtual instruction will continue to be viral. Because there will be demand on the part of the students as well as on the part of the management. I'll come to that also. So those things will become useful when the professors and students come back to the physical classroom. Because a part of our curriculum can still be delivered on the virtual mode. And then things which cannot be managed in the physical classroom can also be moved to this online. So the real benefit will come when we are back to the physical classroom. And all those technologies of asynchronous teaching, like all those platforms like Canvas, Blackboard, and some of you D2L that desire to learn, some of you must have tried your hands. All of them, along with the synchronous modes like Zoom or even Google Meet, Teams, MS Teams, the platforms will continue to be with us. They will not disappear all of a sudden. They will be with us and they will yield significant benefits when these methods get layered with face-to-face instruction. Now that layering is going to be a reality as I envision, and that will empower the instructors more, because we have already started getting into it. We are taking a lot more trainings because it's also a matter of survival. But when we get back to the physical face-to-face situation, we are not going to give up. Most of us will not give up, including senior teachers will still continue to use these layered methods, which will enrich the teaching learning experience. So for me, the post-pandemic learning scenario will be, some of the features would be like, one, that learners and the teachers with very widely shared understanding of digital tools, they will understand. See, that's what I said. Sorry, I'll just take a sip of water. Now, I'm not a digital evangelist. So I always consider, and I've considered, and I'm learning, I'm still learning these methods. So we will have an understanding. After 1 year of teaching, this is my understanding. And I think my learners and my students will also understand that the digital tools are not substitutes to classroom. They are complements. They're complements. And they cannot substitute the intimacy and immediacy of face-to-face learning. So we will continue to use them for all the tasks which will not involve probably this kind of face-to-face interaction. And secondly, we deal with huge amount of contents, especially in postgraduate teaching. And we all know that number of lectures and the portion that we need to cover or uncover will not be proportionate in most of the universities and institutes. So we are all grappling with too much content. So with this layered hybrid mode of teaching, what could happen is more contents could be moved online, and the more precious classroom time could be used more productively for discussions, debate, guided practice, which will enrich the students rather than giving some very basic information in the classroom. So that is one more change that I envision. And the other thing which I strongly feel is that online education will become a strategic priority at every institution. So many of the strategies will revolve around the possibility of online education. For example, strategy of testing strategy, content delivery strategy. Curriculum enhancement strategies, teacher training strategies will depend quite a bit now on online education. So it's going to be a strategic priority because planning of an academic year and planning of an academic calendar, planning of activities, even including co-curricular activities, might depend upon the availability of online education. So this is going to have a strategic priority in every institution for, I think, subsequently till we all will continue teaching. It might not go away. So we cannot wish away now online teaching. It is a reality and we cannot wish that away. However bad or however difficult that is for us. Then I would also feel there is an economy that it is going to generate, that I've already started seeing, sensing it in many places. Because online possibility gives a different timetable. And hence, many presidents of organizations and academic institutes, provosts, deans, trustees will understand that online education is a potential source for new revenue. So new courses can be launched completely on this mode, short-term courses, which will be open now. One doesn't have to be a bona fide student. And even under NEP, we have this idea of credit bank, wherein one can earn credit from different sources. So it is an opportunity for both students as well as for the people who are involved in the academic business as well, because I'm also mindful of many of the private colleges, universities, and institutes, and even some of the normal aided colleges which are gasping for funds, especially in the context of a drying non-salary grants. So this would be considered as an earning, a kind of a source of revenue also. Then one more issue that might happen is that of the continuity and dropout. I don't know how many of you have started thinking deeply about that. We, particularly in a college like ours, we had a problem, two issues. We had a balance of payment. Some students were not able to pay the fee in the last year. They had various reasons. So the outstanding fee was to the vicinity of around 10 lakhs or more than that. And then subsequently, in the next year, there was a rider to the admission that you cannot take admission for the next year unless you clear the due of the previous year, which was also very difficult for some of them. So there was an issue of continuity. So online education, in many cases, when people are held up in different places or they are not able to travel across, then online education might even to some extent be a part of the college, every institution's plan for academic continuity. Academic continuity in terms of program being delivered, portion being completed. So the principals and the academic planners could tell you that if you cannot complete the portion 100%, maybe in a physical classroom, you could take a certain part of that as online delivery. So that is also going to happen. So there is a kind of academic continuity in terms of completion of the curriculum, testing and so on, and also about, to some extent, checking the academic dropout when students cannot travel and so on. So this will also come in a very big way. Coming to almost to my end of submission, future practices that I would envision. One is, as Dabir Madam has already mentioned, there will be, and there has been, and there will be a lot of e-resources mobilization at the college level and at the university level. And I'm happy that Nagpur University has thought about the resource sharing, co-creation of a resource and then sharing that. It's extremely heartening. So there will be more effort in recording, editing, and posting of modules, complete modules, apart from just lessons. I think we will evolve from just posting a few lessons to modules. A module, if you go by the definition of e-learning, it will include a lot of other items as well. It would have text, it would have video lecture, it would also have a segment of check your progress, a quiz. All of them will go into a part of the module. So one module will include all these different modes. And we will evolve from posting content to posting of the modules. Then we will also be using websites. We attended and we all were trained in the last academic year to how to create a website. And then both individual teachers and also the institution will be will have to create websites, our own websites, to disseminate our content, to reach out to the audience, college, and with limited access filtering or open access to things. Then YouTube channels, which are again free, we can create. There will be more of the YouTube channel creation for content uploading. And along with that, institutional investment. This is one point which has been disturbing me very thoroughly. There has not been a concerted effort on the part of neither the government nor the higher education bodies to instruct the institutions to come out with a feasible investment policy. I don't mean investment in terms of only money, but also the space, infrastructure support, and so on. So colleges and like between good college and ordinary college or maybe average college, there will also be, students will be able to differentiate between ordinary content. I might be a good speaker, but maybe my video quality is very bad, or maybe my production quality of my PPT is very bad. So institutions and also the teachers will have to invest in training the educators. Now, what had happened, as I reminded, we all launched into this platform without having sufficient training. Nobody taught us, we were compelled to migrate onto this platform. So training will be on many areas. For example, e-content production, how to produce, edit. And I'm a big believer in editing the content. E-content production, editing, then website creation and managing, how to create and manage your own website, creation of YouTube channels, and most importantly, anything and everything cannot go online. There is a huge copyright issue. Some of the Indian library portals were taken to task by some publishers in the West because the content that was uploaded was an infringement of copyright. So I think all colleges and under IQSC or maybe some other banner will also have to seriously think. For example, even if I do my PPT, this entire PPT is copyright free. The images that I have taken are from places or locations where the content is free. For example, I've depended on Pixabay, not Google. I don't pick up from Google. Images have a huge amount of copyright issues. So I don't generally take. So the images have been taken from Pixabay, which gives open access. There is no copyright issue. So copyright literacy, like in India, the difference between the content that gets uploaded from many of the universities abroad and India is that we make things randomly and then we upload. Thankfully, nobody checks that. So I think as a part of the intellectual honesty, integrity, that we should discourage, like plagiarism, we should also know that videos, see, for example, I cannot upload a PDF file of an article which I take from some other. Teachers have been doing that. That's a very alarming situation. And I think this all will come crashing once this becomes very stringent. So I believe that before even teaching or training, like all academic planners will have to invest a lot on that, making all these channels and websites. Before that, programs on copyright literacy. Like what is copyright, and where what is infringement of copyright will also be a major part, and institutional investment will also be directed to that. So these are a few practices, and this is my last slide, and I like a term, it's in the context of this pandemic situation, or what we call as a post-pandemic. We are into what is called crisis resilient education. All educators are crisis resilient, and we are also making our students crisis resilient. We are trying to show resilience by getting back to education. So some of the features, and when we are looking at that, when we are looking at a roadmap, one is that we would get into a lot more technology enabled open education, because students have already got a taste that they can stay at home and study. Getting now them back to a physical classroom will also be not very easy. So something will come up, like many private universities will also come up with what is called this technology enabled open education systems. Then there will also be a lot of new delivery technologies, like the platforms that we are using beyond Zoom and other things. There will be new delivery media, YouTube and beyond that. A lot of individual tools, teaching tools and instructional tools will also come up. Now we also might evolve, and necessarily so, certain measures to make online testing more robust. Now the problem, one of the central issues that I faced, I'm sorry to use a term like this in this on this platform, the degrees are getting bogus. Sorry to say that, like the kind of marking scheme and the education and the examination. For example, a subject like English literature being tested, the learning of a student being tested with 50 MCQs is a kind of an anticlimax. So to make, how do we make our testing? Like we just adopted what? An online delivery, and what was handy at that point of time was MCQ. So that is a kind of a crisis management. But now after 1 year, we should know the pitfalls. We should be aware of that, and to what extent one can use MCQs, and how do we make the testing more robust. So that what I mean by here is a test by the definition should be objective, should be verifiable, and should be graded, so that definitely in this MCQ, the ordinary, average and below average students are very happy. But the advanced learners are not very happy. So for example, I have a lot of graduates coming with same percentage or some same CGPA and so on. So this shows that the testing is not very robust. Then we need to look at testing beyond MCQs to see how one can test analytical, writing and cognitive skills, all the time remaining online as well. If that is not done, in the next 2-3 years, our degrees will become, all the degrees will become absolutely bogus. Then, yeah, On the other hand, we also have this issue of dropout, because some students, because of their home ambience or the economic conditions, might turn into dropouts. How do we mitigate dropouts? And there is also the tendency, at least in India, for this digital disengagement. Some people get wary. It's already, like after 1 year, digital wariness is another thing. And then there is an issue of digital disengagement. Like they will log in, but will not show their face. So how do we, the resistance to learn? Like in a physical classroom, there are new behavioral issues coming up. So it's a time to understand all of them and then take some appropriate measures so that we will have a robust, reliable, online, crisis resilient education. Yeah, thank you so much. All of you have been very angelic, listening to some rambling thoughts from my side. As I said, I was more interested in the perspective and a kind of a reassessment that we have to do after 1 year of online content delivery. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Sir, will you please stop screen sharing? Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. For educators, the COVID-19 pandemic is a quite essential, adaptive, and transformative challenge. Honorable Dr. Dinesh Kumar, sir, has very well explained about these challenges before the educators. He not only discussed the teaching learning methodologies in the post-COVID scenario, but also told us how educators can make teaching learning process and curriculum delivery student-centered and fruitful. At the same time, sir also discussed about significant concerns in the way of online teaching learning process. Respected sir, thank you so much for your enlightening thoughts. Thank you, sir. Now I invite Shri Pramod Gorde, sir, IQAC coordinator of Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College, Parshuni, and request him to propose the vote of thanks. Shri Pramod Gorde, sir.
Okay, sir.
Over to you, Pramod, sir.
Can you hear me? Are you hear me, sir? Thank you, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir. Please continue.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to one and all. It is my great pleasure to propose vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing institutes of these two institutes. On this occasion, I want to thank Honorable our patrons, Honorable Sri Ranjit Babu Deshmukh, ex-minister and president of Vidya Shikshan Prasarak Mandal, Nagpur. Likewise, Honorable Advocate Ashish Jaiswal, MLA, the leading MLA of our constituency, Ramtek, and president of Vidyasagar Education Society. I would like to thank Honorable Srimati Anitaji Jaiswal, the Secretary, Vidyasagar Education Society, Ramtek. Likewise, Honorable Sri Yuvrajaji Chalko, Secretary, BSPM, Academy of Higher Education, Nagpur. I would like to thank the chief guest of today's webinar, Honorable Dr. Urmila Davir Madam, the Principal Rajkumar Keval Ramani Kanya Mahavidyalaya, the Chairperson, Board of Studies in English, RT, MNU, Nagpur University, Nagpur. optimistic, her idea of a cluster of colleges, everything. Madam, you truly make this day full of knowledge for us. Your deep and insight, pleasant way of imparting knowledge that has added glory to this webinar. Thank you once again, madam. I want to thank today's resource persons of this webinar, Honorable Dr. Dinesh Kumar sir. He is Associate Professor of Head of Department of English, V.G. Vazai College, Mumbai, for enlarging us with the knowledge. Sir, you gave deep insight into the topic of the webinar and revived some intellectual facts of online teaching and learning. You have enlightened us with your slideshow, your idea of blending language learning process, that is a quality online learning program. Thank you once more, sir. I would like to thank Dr. P.K.U. Pillai sir, the principal of Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, and Dr. L.B. Zadav, the principal, Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College, for their great support to make this webinar successful. How can I name the efforts, tremendous efforts made by these two men, that means my friends? I would like to give special thanks to Dr. Savan Dharmapuriwar, IQAC coordinator, Vidyasagar Kala Mahavidyalaya, as well as the technical assistance given by Dr. Commerce, Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College. Thank you, sir, once more. And all the members of teaching and non-teaching staff of these two institutes, that is Vidyasagar Mahavidyalaya as well as Mahatma Gandhi Arts and Commerce College, to participate in the collaborative program. Thank you once more. Thank you to all the participants who have joined this meeting. I also heartily thankful for all the participants. Once again, I will over to Dr. Dharmapuriwar sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Pramod Gorde sir. And now, with the permissions of the conveners and the organizers, I declare that this webinar is over. The link of the feedback form will be given in the WhatsApp group. The certificates will be issued only after submitting the feedback form. I once again thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining.